to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, July 7th, 2015. Getting into the week here. We've got lots and lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And, oh, my goodness, I seem to have lost my my stack window. Let me get that back up, make sure we don't have a caller waiting on the line. And I was just noticing there on the SRN news break, they're going on and on about this one Nazi that they're going to wag at us to try and say Israel has a right to do what they're doing in the here and now based on things that happened before we were all born. And as a measure of how desperate Israel is getting to try and find Nazis to wag at us, they're basically prosecuting this guy for guarding the luggage of the prisoners. That's it. They even admit that. And he has said, that was my job. I was supposed to guard the belongings of the people getting off the trains. And they're trying to turn that into this idea that he personally turned the valve on the gas chambers. Remember the other guy they had that they were going to bring up on charges because he was an accountant at the camp. Oh, he's an accountant. He did bad. He made mistakes with his addition or something. And, of course, Israel's facing a huge, huge problem. They're running out of real Nazis to wag at us because whatever it is that did or did not happen way back then, they just don't have any more people to wag at us about that. And Israel's facing a problem. How are they going to beg for sympathy and pity and, you know, while they go on killing the Palestinians and invading other countries and basically taking over our country from within, subverting our nation from within. Oh, we're allowed to come in and buy the Congress out from under you because of what Hitler did way back then in the middle of the last century. Now, today was supposed to be the new extended deadline for the Iranian negotiations. They've been extended yet again. The negotiators are saying they're very, very close. Iran continues to make concessions, and Iran is now allowing limits to be imposed on their non-nuclear arsenal. That's the new deal. You can only have so many missiles. You can have only so many tanks. We have to make sure that you're perfectly helpless so that whenever Israel and the United States decides to finally come on in and slaughter you all, that you really can't fight back. Because both the United States and Israel are victorious in war against enemies that have been disarmed or starved into helplessness. They're really not very good against military peers. Now, what's going on here, of course, this is all about the sanctions that have been imposed on Iran. And what is going on? The world understands the U.S. has weaponized the world's forced dependency on the U.S. dollar in order to strip Iran of their ability to defend themselves against a future attack. And remember, Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years. This is all about rendering Iran too weak and helpless to resist either Israel or the U.S. coming on in and smashing their country up when they want to, as the U.S. and Israel have done repeatedly over the last couple of decades. And this is a major reason so many other nations are trying to break free of the U.S.-dominated Western financial system. They understand the U.S. is using the power and influence from having that major global trade and banking currency for bad purposes. That's what the sanctions are, weaponizing the global economic system. Now, Netanyahu is still out there. He is prepared to fight the entire world over this Iran deal. He is going to make sure that it's not going to go forward. Now, he's getting a very cool reaction from the White House, which is not to be surprising given how Netanyahu basically grandstanded, coming to the Congress and talking to the Congress and getting standing ovations and everything, and basically tried to end-run President Obama. And so Obama is carrying a little bit of a grudge, which he has a right to do, given Netanyahu's behavior. So Netanyahu is apparently behind this move in the Congress to pass a veto-proof bill to extend the Iranian sanctions for 10 years, no questions asked, which of course would completely invalidate the P5+1 deal. So he's out to wreck this any way that he can. And he's out there doing a full court press, which thankfully seems to be confined, at least for the moment, to more of his cartoons. Netanyahu was really big at putting out these little cartoons, and he managed to annoy the entire Western media by claiming they were dupes during last summer's attack on Gaza. And now Netanyahu has a new cartoon out there basically trying to say that ISIS and Iran are really one and the same, and if you don't smash Iran down, it means ISIS will get nuclear weapons aimed at all of those Christians out there. He's just fear-mongering as hard as he can, because his goal is to smash up a regional rival. Israel can't compete economically in terms of manufacturing and agriculture, especially with that huge flow of cash coming in from the United States of America, possibly cutting off when the U.S. economy implodes. And there are way too many governments around the world, including our own, who don't want to try and be better than other nations because it's easier to go in and smash up those other nations to reduce them to poverty, to servitude. That's it. It's much easier to smash the competition than to go on out there and try and build a truly great nation. Whoops, my mistake. I left that little switch thing on. There we are. Now, over at Desert Peace, Steve has put up an article, Gaza a Year Later, the real story and the one from Reuters. And he's basically juxtaposing the reports from inside Gaza about the lingering destruction. They have not managed to rebuild a lot of Gaza because Israel is refusing to allow material support in there to rebuild their homes and schools and hospitals. And he juxtaposes it with the Reuters reporting about how optimistic for the future the people of Gaza are, and they're all just happy and cheerful and looking forward to a better, brighter future, which we know is not going to happen because Israel does these periodic smackdowns of Gaza. I think they've done 6 in the last 3 years. I'm sorry, that's 3 in the last 6 years. I had that backwards. The Western media is absolutely, totally under the control of Israel. It's politically correct. You can't say bad things about Israel. It's not politically correct. Politically correct is an attack on the First Amendment, just so that you understand where I'm coming from. Meanwhile, Turkey is moving artillery and missiles to their border with Syria, getting ready for conflict up there. Too many people think a war is going to solve all their problems, and it never really does. It just moves the money around, plunges everybody into debt to the private central bankers, and yes, occasionally they'll redraw the lines on a map in dried blood. Now, there's an interesting article that comes out of antiwar.com where Obama is being criticized because he's always talking about escalating and against ISIS, and we're going to move forward and we're going to achieve a victory. But administration officials are saying basically there is actually no change to the strategy regarding ISIS. Nothing is being done. And Obama's out there saying ISIS will eventually be destroyed. Now, eventually can be a very, very long time. Perpetual war. Remember, that was the goal of the Project for the New American Century, is literally a century of unending war by the United States against the rest of the planet. For people of my age, that means we'll never live to see a time of peace ever again in our lifetimes. Now, given that ISIS has been proven to be a U.S. tool to justify invasions of nations which haven't actually done anything to us, it makes sense that the U.S. strategy toward ISIS is going to be lukewarm and limp-wristed. And as a matter of fact, over at Middle East Monitor, they're saying if the U.S. is really so serious about destroying ISIS, why is the policy toward them so completely misguided? ISIS works for the White House. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, a lot of people are paying attention to Jade Helm 15, which is kicking off here in 10 more days officially. A lot of the activities have already been going on in all these areas, but there's another one going on that we need to pay attention to. This is called Talisman Sabre 15. This is a naval exercise involving the United States and Australia, and it is centered on the George Washington Carrier Strike Group. They are basically down there as of today off the north coast of Australia, exercising with the Australian Army and basically rehearsing for a scenario involving power projection into Asian waters, specifically China. And so they are absolutely dead certain they want a new world war because they can't think of anything else to do to get out of this mess they've made. Now, let's grab a phone call here real quick. We're going to talk to John in Barbados. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yeah, your statement about Iran. Apparently, according to Press TV, the Iranian parliament and what have you have rejected any idea that their missile systems and ballistic missiles will be curtailed. Completely rejected it.
Well, they're right to do that because the P5+1 deal is about this claim that Iran is building nuclear weapons, and non-nuclear weapons were never supposed to be part of the deal. This is something that Israel, ordered the U.S. and France to throw into the mix in an attempt to kill the deal. This is what Netanyahu's announced to the world. He himself personally is going to kill this deal that could lead to a peaceful resolution because he doesn't want peace. He wants war with Iran as long as it's the American kids who have to go fight and die in it.
Well, the other thing is, that report you had in the Mirror about this new Russian secret weapon, I may suggest that actually it's been field tested on the Donald Cook.
Well, I know you sent me an email about that, and I'm sure the technologies are similar, but the Donald Cook was within very close range of the Russian aircraft with the electronic warfare suite. Being able to deploy to outer space implies some additional technologies. I don't think it's exactly the same system. It probably has a lot of overlap. But this idea that Russia has fielded a system which can disable satellites in orbit, that's actually preferable to trying to blow them up, where the shrapnel literally becomes a problem for everything else that's in orbit. And if they have actually done this thing, and it's not somebody's idea of a propaganda bluff, it's a better way of dealing with space warfare in terms of long-lasting damage that everybody in the future is going to have to live with.
Yeah, I'm sort of confused somewhat about, because the systems are basically the same. One is just more powerful. That's the only difference.
I think you're dealing with two different situations here. First of all, we don't know the particular satellites that are being targeted. In the case of the Donald Cook, you're dealing with a computerized synthetic aperture radar that is painting targets with targeting indicators and getting the echoes. That's a pretty straightforward task to defeat, and the Russians have apparently succeeded in doing that. In terms of a satellite, you're dealing with optical sensors. You're dealing with other systems that the Donald Cook would not have. So I don't think it's the same exact system. Probably there are there's some overlap. I wouldn't assume it's the same exact system.
Well, I don't assume it's exactly the same, but the Vulcan bomber used to carry a steerable waveguide which pushed out a pencil beam of X-band radar, which was fired straight down the front of an approaching aircraft, which disabled all their radar and literally blew the front end up of their radar. Yeah,
that would definitely do it. I mean, we've got this CX radar floating down here in Pearl Harbor. They're doing some big major work on it. They got it all covered up underneath and everything. And despite its shortcomings as an actual detector of incoming threats, I mean, there's no question if they were to point that dish at something and crank all of the power through it, that they could basically cook flight crews inside incoming aircraft.
Absolutely. But the other thing I'm looking at is this deal with Iran. What seems to be happening is these late coming sticking points which keep being raised. Obviously, Netanyahu's got a deal in it. But I think the other countries, because of the basic nature and what Netanyahu and his administration have been doing to the people of Palestine and what have you, Europe is fed up with this man. And I think they'll go off on their own and do a deal with
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. The U.S. will, and possibly France, because Hollande is under Netanyahu's control as well. France and the U.S. may stand up and say, there's no deal, we're going to continue the sanctions against Iran, and all of the other countries are going to say, all right, go ahead and sanction, we're going to make our own deal with Iran and do business with Iran, and Iran's economy will improve, and it'll be France and the U.S. that is cut off from Iranian oil exports and Iranian markets for their products. And so this is going to backflash on the U.S. Something severely. Especially with Europe starting to come apart at the seams, I don't expect them to remain united on this Iranian situation because they understand Iran isn't the threat. The U.S. and Israel is the threat. And they're just whooping on Iran the same way they whooped on Iraq, same way they whooped on Libya, Yemen, and all these other countries. Nobody is fooled by any of this talk that Iran might have a nuclear weapon. And again, if Iran had a nuclear weapon, what are they going to do with it? They'll put it in a museum or they'll march it down the street in a parade. Iran is not going to attack either the U.S. or Israel because overwhelming nuclear retaliation would be the instant result.
Yes, I'm looking at Greece now, Michael, with the arrival of Newland on the scene.
Yes, I'm going to be talking about that here in just a little bit. Listen, John, I'm going to let you go here. Thank you very much, and we're going to grab Ello in the Netherlands real quick before the commercial break. What's on your mind?
There's nothing much on my mind. I want to say I got so much respect for the Greek people. They say oxy, so no.
Yes.
And yeah, that was beautiful. And I must say, you have yesterday you had something on top of your on your website, and you were talking to another radio station. And I listened to your interview, and I must say, Mike, you're the man. You know exactly, yeah. And greetings to Claire.
Certainly, I'll pass on
hello to Claire. Say hello to Claire.
I certainly will pass on the greetings to her here. We got about 8 seconds left here. Is there anything else you want to say?
I know.
All right. Well,
keep it up and talk to you later.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We got to take a break here for commercials. We'll be back talking about Greece. There are some significant developments there as well. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show, and I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Greece. Now, today, supposedly, probably winding up about now, was supposed to be this big Eurogroup meeting, Eurozone summit on the fate of Greece. Now, Tsipras is going in there with a popular mandate to reject more austerity. The money junkies are going in there maintaining their hard line because they are trapped. They cannot cut Greece's debt. They cannot write off the odious debt. They can't lower the interest rates. They can't change the payments without all of the other members of the European Union in similar economic distress standing up and demanding exactly the same thing. Now, as of right now, 16 out of 18 Eurozone members are in favor of Greece leaving the European Union, followed by a controlled bankruptcy. That last part might not happen because Greece is simply Greece's parliament has already voted the odious portion of the debt, 265 billion euros. They're not going to pay it. They don't feel they're obligated to pay a debt created through fraud between their own government and Goldman Sachs. Now, Tsipras is still making polite speech about keeping Greece inside the euro, but at this point, even Fox News is saying it's only a matter of time. Now, with NATO itself potentially at risk, because Greece is part of NATO, and if they split off and pivot toward Russia, that's going to be a major blow. Putin is rolling out the red carpet for Greece. And that means, sooner or later, the U.S. is going to go into Athens and undertake one of their not very covert destabilization campaigns like they did in Kiev January of last year. Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973. It's what the U.S. does. The next step for the U.S. is to overthrow the elected Greek government, if not just assassinate them outright, install a pro-banker junta, and plunge yet another nation into a bloody civil war like they did Ukraine. And I'm not the only person saying this is where this is headed. There's an article over at Investment Watch blog saying the U.S. is not a helpless bystander. And it says the U.S. is preparing a coup to prevent Greece from pivoting toward Russia. Better dead than red, or whatever rhetoric they're going to use. We have to destroy Greece to save it from Russia. And the corporate media is very much on board with the money junkies. The media is out there saying, how dare the Greeks walk away from how dare they refuse the offer of a rescue. It was never a rescue. It's just plunging them into more debt. The bankers don't do anything out of kindness or charity. It's all about jamming you further onto unpayable debt to make you their slaves. The bankers conspired to plunge Greece into unpayable debt. It's what bankers do. The essence of the banking industry is to keep us all, whether we're individuals or nations, slaves to debt. That's what they do. Banks are not about money. They're about enslavement and power. And people are just tired of all this austerity because in Greece's case, it didn't work. Austerity, more austerity, more austerity, and Greece's economy went downhill. It didn't work. Why do the central bankers keep preaching austerity? Well, because it's a giant bank bailout at the expense of ordinary people. Now, over in Athens, Costa Lapavitsas, let me back up so I get this right. Costa Lapavitsas, member of the Greek Parliament, saying that their best solution right now is to nationalize all the banks because the people of Greece absolutely detest the private owners of the big banks and the big media. They want these institutions taken over to serve the nation and the people. That's going to be a growing trend. This is part of the political contagion that the EU and the IMF and the ECB and the Federal Reserve are terrified of. This idea that banks and the national economy should be under the control of the nation. A public currency handled as a public utility. That's an idea they have tried to crush out every time it has emerged. For hundreds of years they've been playing this scam. If you have not already read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, please do so and send it on to your friends and family. That thing has gone viral all over the globe. People are waking up to exactly what's been going on. Germany is finally coming to grips with the possibility of a Grexit. And Peter Schiff is out there. He's the CEO of Euro Pacific Capital. And he's out there trying to sell this idea that really the Greek people becoming independent of the central bankers is going to be far, far worse than remaining their slaves. And he's taking this tough tone that the EU cannot allow Greece to hold everyone hostage. He's got it backwards. It's the central bankers holding everyone hostage. They're trying to sell this myth of benevolent enslavement. That if you will be the slave to the bankers, life will be better than if you try and go your own way. Needless to say, in all the Greek turmoil, some of their more skilled workers are leaving the country. Their high-tech sector is being devastated. Greece is in serious, serious trouble. Now, there's an article over at byline.com talking about how more and more people are realizing that Greece isn't the problem here. Europe basically played Greece. They sucked all the wealth out of it they could with austerity on austerity on austerity and debt on debt on debt on debt. And that's what led Greece to where they are. And the people who are living in those other member states of the European Union need to understand the bankers are going to do exactly the same thing to them as well. They're all being played. They're all being looted because the goal of every private central bank is for all the real wealth of a nation to be under their control. Greece is the canary in the coal mine. And we shouldn't be blaming the canary. The problem is the mine. Now, apparently in this confrontation between Athens and Brussels, there was a political agenda where the European Union wanted to get rid of the Syriza party for being leftist. Oh my goodness. Remember, the world breaks down politically really to two basic groups. Socialists who think everybody deserves a fair share of life's blessings, and fascists who think everything should belong to them. Everything else is just a label, a disguise, camouflage, counterfeit. But that's really what it breaks down to. People who think everybody deserves an equal share of life's blessings, and the other people who think they want to own it all. That's what it comes down to. That's the difference between socialism and fascism. Now, there's another article over here in RINF.com where the Greek no vote spurs wider resistance, talking about the political contagion from the Greek vote. The fact that the Greeks did it has encouraged people in the other member states of the European Union to say, hey, it's time for us to throw off this yoke, to throw off this slavery, to stop letting Brussels bully us into more and more poverty, more and more austerity. And by the way, little reminder here, when you yourself voluntarily choose to live a simpler, less costly life, that's austerity. When the government comes in and demands you live a simpler, less expensive life in order to give more to the bankers, that's dictatorship. And that's what the Greeks have rejected. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I got an email from somebody asking me to elucidate on the odious debt that Greece is suffering under. And it goes back to when Papandreou was in charge of Greece. And Greece had economic problems back then, nowhere near what they've got now. And Papandreou was applying for some assistance from the money junkies and wanted to make Greece's economy look better than it really was. So he made this deal with Goldman Sachs to engage in a massive network of currency swaps with the intention of concealing the true scale of Greece's debt. And in the process, Goldman Sachs made a huge amount of money off the deal, and Papandreou literally doubled Greece's actual debt, and it didn't come to light until Papandreou stepped down and his successors came in, saw the bookkeeping and said, oh boy, are we in trouble. Now, under the international principle of odious debt, debt accrued by a government for purposes other than the care of the nation itself are considered odious and not the responsibility of the people of that nation. Money borrowed for war, money borrowed to give to a foreign government, money borrowed for surveillance and police oppression, and all of those things are considered odious debt under this principle. And the people of Greece aren't responsible for it. Of course, over at the IMF, Christine Lagarde, who's paid almost $1 million a year, tax-free, has put on her stovepipe hat and her cape and her bullwhip out there saying, debt is holy, debt is sacrosanct, you never question the debt, no matter what. Now, again, getting back to this idea that it almost seems inevitable, the U.S. is going to try and go in and topple Greece's government for refusing to run Greece for the benefit of the private central bankers. The unpardonable sin. And over at INFOWARS, they have an article about how the U.S. and Germany are preparing to engineer a coup in Greece to keep the country connected to the European Union and NATO, because Greece is the bulwark of the southeastern European flank. If Greece pivots to Russia, there is a major strategic military challenge there. And one of the tip-offs that the U.S. is planning on doing this is that the United States coup master, or mistress, Victoria Nuland, has been going in and out of Athens, meeting with opposition groups. And remember, Victoria Nuland is the person who sets all this stuff up. She was over there in Kiev, January of last year. She's been in Armenia as opposition to their government kicks up, and they move toward a coup d'etat. Because this is how the U.S. has built its empire since the end of World War II. The U.S. has gone in and covertly tried to change the government of 50 other countries. They've succeeded about half the time. I'm not sure we can consider Ukraine a success at this point. The difference is everybody around the world understands this is what the U.S. has been doing all this time. Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973, Cuba when the U.S. put in Batista. And every time one of these conquered, overthrown countries stands up and ejects the U.S. puppet ruler, oh, they're terrorists, they hate us for our freedoms, we can't be friends with them. Which is what they said with Cuba when Castro came to power. Iran in 1979 when they kicked out their U.S. puppet, the Shah. Same thing in Chile when the dictator Pinochet finally fell from power. Oh, they only hate America for our freedoms. They hate us because we've got Kim Kardashian. They hate us because we've got Miley Cyrus and Disneyland. Their hatred is completely unreasoning, and you shouldn't pay attention to anything that they say, except that we all are. So at this point, it is a given, and I hope somebody from the Greek government is reading my website or listening to my show, so I can send you this warning. Make sure you are wearing your Kevlar undies and stay out of small aircraft. Because all of the countries that are still enslaved to private central banks are going to do whatever it takes to smash Greece into a smear on the ground to put out the message that breaking free from the slavery of private central banks is worse than remaining an obedient slave. It's sort of the national level version of what the antebellum plantation owners used to do. When a slave tried to break away, they, whipped the skin off their backside to send that message. Being a slave isn't cool, but you're going to be more comfortable as our slave than being anything else. And that's what these countries that are slaves to private central banks, they're acting as overseers to go into Greece and slap them around and say, you will go back to being a slave, und you will like it, Schweinhund. Now, it may be too late. The contagion is spreading, both economic and political. Story over at Investment Watch blog, saying that everybody is looking at this disaster in terms of Greece only. But what has started in Greece may soon play out across the entire globe. Remember, over in Austria, enough people have signed a petition to force the Austrian parliament to have a debate on remaining in the EU. The leading candidate for the upcoming French presidential elections is campaigning on a promise to get France out of the EU. We're hearing the similar things in Portugal, in Italy, and Spain. The European Union has been a raw deal for the people of Europe. Great for the European central bankers, and that's why it was set up, to build larger and larger human ranches to make the owners of the banks richer and richer and richer. But it was always a pyramid scheme, it was always a Ponzi, and it has to come down at some point. You've got Greece has just voted no more austerity. Puerto Rico is gone into a death spiral of default. They're basically cheating the people who bought credit default swaps against Puerto Rico's debt by saying it's not a default, it's a moratorium on payments. And so we don't have to make good on those credit default swaps. Because all these Wall Street firms selling these credit default swaps, they don't have the cash to make good on the claims. Same thing that happened to AIG back in 2008. Ukraine is expected to default in a matter of weeks, and Greece has another major payment they're supposed to make on the 20th this month, anniversary of the Apollo landing and Viking, and it doesn't look like they're going to make that either. They can't stop this. That 11th marble we have been telling you about for years is coming home to roost. And yes, the private central bankers can crank up the printing presses and type lots of zeros into their computer keyboards, but every time they do, it weakens their currency. They're not actually creating new wealth. What they're doing through their computers and their printing presses is taking what little wealth remains and spreading it around further, mostly into their own pockets. Because they can't create new money to put in the pockets of the Wall Street investment firms to keep the stock market propped up, which is what they've obviously been doing for the last 2 days, without taking away wealth and purchasing power from you. It's like an invisible, hidden, additional tax. Whenever they need to create new money, it devalues the money you already have. They're cheating you. Every time they crank up that printing press, every time they type more numbers into that computer, they are cheating you. They're defrauding you of the purchasing power you worked for and earned. It's like a retroactive cut in pay. Now, Texas is starting to stockpile their gold. They're trying to get their gold back from the New York Federal Reserve. Good luck on that one. But they do have some of their own gold. They're putting it into a single location. Texas is laying the foundation for declaring their own currency should they decide to secede. And there's a lot of talk down there about that. Now, something very weird is going on with gold and silver prices. They got slammed today. Absolutely slammed. And it doesn't make sense because over the last couple of years, the output of the world's gold mine has dropped by half. There's a lot more mining activity, but a lot less gold coming out. The world's largest silver producer is saying their output is down 12% from last year. Now, under the normal rules of supply and demand, prices should be going up. But they got slammed down with a bunch of paper or other manipulation. Now, the U.S. Mint has suspended sales of the Silver Eagle coins on the exact same day. Somehow, a bunch of silver got dumped on the market to suppress the prices yet again. They're not going to be able to keep that up much longer either. All righty, we're going to have to take a break for our top of the hour news break. I know we got a caller waiting on the line. You're going to have to wait until after we come back from the news. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And, of course, while all eyes are on Greece and Puerto Rico and Ukraine and Detroit and the rest of it, not paying as much attention to China as you might. Their stock market is in serious trouble. It's lost 1/3 of its value over the last few months. Nearly 25% of Chinese stocks have stopped trading. And that is a red warning sign. This whole global Ponzi scheme is about to come crashing down here. All right, we're going to take a phone call. David in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was just watching RT, and they were showing how the Greeks were basically staring down the ECB and declaring that much of the debt they supposedly owe is odious, which is, I think, going to start creeping into everyone's vocabulary.
It should. It should. There are not all debt is legitimate for the people to be responsible for.
Like most of the United States debt.
Agreed.
Anyway, it looks like the other European countries like Spain and Ireland are going to follow, and it is blowing the entire facade of the central banks everywhere. And I started listening to your show about 2 years ago, and I always knew that there was a principle, in principle, that there was such a thing as odious debt, but I never knew what it was called until I started listening to your show. So I just wanted to say thank you, and you're my main source of the truth for what's going on in the world. And I have a cousin that lives in Dover.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to let you go here, and we've got another caller on the line. I don't have a name. What is your name, and what would you like to talk about?
Hey, yeah, it's DJ.
Oh, yes, DJ. Okay. Go ahead.
Just wanted to bring to attention there's a movement going on in Russia in the Caucasus region. They were saying that the Islamic State is basically, they're basically announcing that, they're going to take over the IEC, I guess rebels down there, and they're recruiting right now. Russia already knows that basically ISIS is, U.S. backed and funded. So they're obviously not happy that they're already in their borders, and they're actively recruiting. And then also with the there's a U.S. wardrobe going on in the Black Sea. I think that one's Saber. I can't remember the name of it right now, but so that region's looking like it's going to be pretty crazy in the next couple weeks.
It's Talisman Saber, and that's actually down in Australia right now.
Oh, okay. Well, there's another one, not that one. Then there's a war drill going on. What do you call a war game drill going on in the Black Sea right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that one, what the name of that one is, but it's still pretty. It's still kind of frightening that it's already at the doorstep of Russia.
Oh yeah, they're already wargaming all over the place. We see a lot of it out here around Hawaii. We have the highest density of military bases of any state in the Union. They just had an F-16 crash into a small plane over, I think it was North Carolina. So yeah, they're out there rocking and rolling, and they're not paying very close attention where they're going with these things either.
Yeah. Scary times. And did you run the story about that doctor who's protesting against the vaccines? He got basically a shot, and they said he was a suicide, but he managed to shoot and throw himself in the river.
Yeah, and there was that other one where she was. Well, they're having to admit it's a murder because she was bludgeoned to death with a hammer. But yeah, all of a sudden, a lot of the leading lights of the I don't like to call it alternative medicine. I like to use the term independent medicine. But there seem to be meeting with strange deaths. But when you realize that pharmaceuticals are a $360 billion a year business in the United States, that is more than enough motive to go on out and start murdering anybody who stands up and says, look, this is a bad direction. These products are harmful. They're not effective. It's all about making money, and you can treat and cure yourself with stuff that you can make at home. That's a big threat to the profit margin. And, that's motive enough to have some of these people killed.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a sad story, and there's just so many things going on in the news right now. It's just, it's hard to, I know you're not going to run out of material anytime soon.
No, I'm not running out of material at all here. That's the downside. I keep hoping that peace and prosperity and sanity will break out, and I can quit the radio show and shut down this website and spend the rest of my life, being Claire's roadie for her music. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon.
Unfortunately. Well, you're doing a good job, Michael, and I'm going to stay posted as this week is going to be as crazy as ever. So
it's getting crazier and crazier. I think we've definitely gone into the chaos period here. Dustin, thank you very much for the phone call. Or rather, I'm sorry, DJ.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to go ahead and grab Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I didn't talk to you yet.
I know. I'm trying to deal with all the little flashing lights and buttons and everything, and I'm tired. I've been staying up late working on the new website.
Well, hopefully the Donald Cook ain't back in the Black Sea.
Well, they got really seriously demoralized. I'll bet you the Donald Cook has had a major turnover of her crew since that embarrassing situation.
Which leads to that story about the satellite killer that can shut off satellites. So that's linked. That weapon system is linked to that, the Donald Cook. Anything? I don't know. Did you hear anything about the gravity? The Iranians developed some kind of a gravity field.
No, I've heard nothing about that. And going back to Einstein's equations, the amount of energy it takes to alter a gravity field would be way beyond the capability of any technology, any nation here on Earth.
And Mike, that caller yesterday kind of raised my eyebrows with the Jade Helm, with Texas and Utah, and of all times, right now, Texas asks for its gold back, so they know something's coming when they're asking for their gold back.
Oh, yeah. If for no other reason than watching how the Federal Reserve refused to give Germany their gold back, and, everybody who wants their gold back, and the Federal Reserve is saying, it's going to take us years and years to get it together. It shouldn't, because the bullion depository at the New York Federal Reserve operates like a safety deposit box at your bank. You rent and pay a fee for that box, and you can put whatever you want in there, and then you can take it out whenever you want. And the bank is not allowed to go into your safety deposit box and help themselves to your gold coins or your heirloom jewelry or whatever, and then when you come in for it, say, I'm sorry, we'll get something that sort of looks like it. Because when Germany got their gold back, it wasn't the same bars they had sent over. They didn't have the hallmarks of the German bank, and it turned out to be far less pure. It had actually been melted down and with some other metals to make it look puffier than it really was.
Well, that's a reason to not keep your money in the bank.
Absolutely.
That's like, right there. It's a warning.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Okay, now, oil equipment builder Technip has announced they're laying off 6,000 workers, roughly 16% of their workforce, because even though oil prices are starting back up again, the oil industry is still in a slump. And the effects are still being felt in the United States, in Europe, in Canada. Now, there's another article here, Nation of Change. Corporate capitalism is the foundation of police brutality and the prison state, and they're accurate as long as they change the name, because corporate capitalism is just another name for fascism. And yes, when you have fascism, inevitably it leads to out-of-control police brutality and a prison or police state, which is where we are right now. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, I want to get on to this whole situation about the illegal immigrant who shot that woman in San Francisco, and everybody's just pointing fingers. Oh, it's not us. It's not our policy. It's them. They did. Oh, San Francisco shouldn't have been a sanctuary city. It's the GOP's fault for not giving us enough money for border security, blah, 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 blah. And the Obama administration is on the warpath trying to plant the blame for this horrible crime on the Republican Party. Because after all, Obama's immigration policy is absolutely perfect and pristine, and nobody should ever question it's politically incorrect to question the holy dogma of open border immigration coming on in. And so now San Francisco is basically under attack for being a sanctuary city. And the people in these sanctuary cities all across the country are now waking up and realizing there is a problem. I mean, this guy who shot the woman, Francisco Sanchez, had been deported 5 times. He'd been convicted of multiple felonies. And the police let him go 2 months ago. Just didn't want to bother with the paperwork. Immigration were supposed to let these guys go, and they let him go. And he killed this woman. The illegals get better treatment than the American people. You take a picture of a cop, they're going to beat you to a pulp. If you're an illegal and shoot a woman, well, then, they're going to jail him for that one, but look at all the stuff he got away with. And apparently, over the 4th of July holiday, there was a hit-and-run accident involving another illegal immigrant. He was on drugs, and he drove across the center line of a highway, and crashing his Ford SUV into a vehicle carrying a mother and her 2 children who were injured. This guy has also been deported 6 times over the past 3 years. It's not deportation. Every 6 months he goes home to visit his family, and then he comes right on back. Now, the PC crowd is out there pounding on Donald Trump, saying that there's absolutely no data to support this idea that the illegal immigrants represent some kind of a crime problem here in the United States of America. Well, that may be for the same reason that we don't have accurate numbers regarding how many innocent Americans are shot by the police. It's not a number the government wants anybody to know about, so, hey, let's not track it. But in cities, they're starting to know there is correlation between the per capita illegal immigration and certain crimes. In particular, over in New York, car thefts. As the illegals come in, they will steal cars. Most of them are driving without licenses, without insurance. Of course, out in California, they're mandating giving licenses to them. Congressman Steve King estimates that illegal alien drunk drivers are killing 13 Americans every day. That comes out to 4,745 deaths per year. That would not be happening if we had secure borders. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump isn't looking so unreasonable after all, is he? And the reason they're pounding on him is not because of him being Donald Trump. The candidates running for office next year want to avoid discussions on certain issues that really do affect all of our lives, and illegal immigration is one of them. And that's why the PC crowd is out there saying, oh, you're being racist when you talk about the illegal immigrants being criminals. Well, I mean, common sense has to tell you that people who are living in Mexico or Central America who are doing well are going to stay right where they are. This is not a random sampling of people from Mexico and Central America coming to the United States of America. These are people who couldn't make it where they were. And yes, a lot of them are fleeing prosecution for crimes they have committed. That is absolutely a fact. Donald Trump is right about that. Now, what he said in his speech was that some of the illegal immigrants are criminals, murderers, and rapists. And I think there's been like 500 child molestation cases so far this year at the hands of the illegals. And the media is out there saying that he said all the illegal immigrants are this way. They changed his wording to go on the attack. They're attacking him for challenging the sacred dogma that immigration is cool and immigration is nice. And adding fuel to the fire, Trump is now coming out saying that the real unemployment is way above this 5.3, 5.6% we're getting from the U.S. government. Trump is saying the real unemployment may be 21%. He's still low. It's closer to 40%. But at least he's broaching that subject, and that is also something the candidates running for office next year don't want to talk about, the real scale of the unemployment problem and the economy. And I'm going to have to rethink Donald Trump, because at least he's out there telling the truth about what's going on. Now, Hillary's campaign is still getting a lot of flack over this roping off of the reporters during an appearance she did up in New England on July 4th. And apparently one of Hillary's spokespeople literally said, we roped off the media like animals to keep her parade appearance from becoming chaotic. It looks bad when she's being chased by reporters, so we're going to rope them all off. And basically they were treating these representatives of the corporate media like they were preschoolers on a trip to the museum. We got to keep them roped off so they don't go and touch the bones and the vases and the statues or anything like that. Even CNN got on her case, saying that this roping off of the reporters during the parade shows an attitude of it's the Clinton way or the highway as far as the corporate media is concerned. This is backflashing on her terribly. Everything she does, parking in the handicap stall, shopping at Bergdorf Goodman, taking all this money from these hardline pro-Israel billionaires, it's working against her. She still thinks the world is the way it was back when Bill ran for office, where all these dark secrets could be hidden. And it isn't that way anymore. Now, over at Desert Peace, Steve has another article out there saying Hillary has sold her soul and her country, meaning you, for $2 million. That was her price to sell out the First Amendment right to freedom of speech in order to hop on this thing about we must shut down the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. It's a priority. We've got to stop people from refusing to buy what Israel wants to sell them. And it is an attack on our First Amendment by a presumptive candidate for presidency, because boycotts are a recognized form of nonviolent, peaceful protest protected as free speech under the First Amendment. And Hillary is out there going after that First Amendment with a meat axe because she's paid to do that. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking about Hillary Clinton's campaign. We got an email wondering if those journalists who were roped off have a case against Clinton for wrongful imprisonment. I think maybe. Of course, we know that Hillary Clinton is too high to ever see the inside of a court, which has bearing on the next story, because the emails that have been revealed regarding Benghazi, the emails that Hillary thought were deleted but turned up from other sources like Sidney Blumenthal, have created a case beyond a reasonable doubt and a moral certainty that Hillary Clinton was part of this plan to take weapons from Libya following the overthrow of Gaddafi and ship them to Syria for the mercenaries to use to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. So far, so good. Now, that's a felony because those hired mercenaries are Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and under the USA Patriot Act, it is a felony to be arming terrorist groups. But it goes worse than that. And here we get into the realm of politics being perception. You and I all know that Al-Qaeda and ISIS are manufactured fronts for covert U.S. action. But a huge number of the American people are still convinced they are the enemies in the war on terror. And Hillary Clinton has been providing aid and comfort to the enemy in time of war, which is the legal definition of treason in this country. And while our Just Us system will never charge her, it is important that the voters understand going into next year that Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, provided weapons, ammunition, other material support to groups that are declared to be enemies of the United States of America in the war on terror. That is exactly the legal definition of treason. And I don't think the American people, even the women voters, are going to punch a button for somebody who is a traitor to the United States of America. And it puts Hillary in a very awkward place. It's not like Hillary and Obama can come out and say, look, ISIS and Al-Qaeda are really working for us, so we were arming our own people for the covert overthrow. They're now trapped by their own propaganda and cover-up. They have to maintain the illusion that Al-Qaeda and ISIS are the enemy of the United States of America in the war on terror, and now we have documentation that Hillary Clinton was giving them guns. Aid and comfort to an enemy in time of war is the definition of treason. So let us promise ourselves, this is a call to Rivero's Rangers, that we will make that piece of information obvious to all voters between now and Election Day. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Damien in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. How you doing?
Doing okay.
All right. Just continuing on your line, what you said before, man, that was right on about about her not really. She wants to put the world in the same. She wants everybody's minds to be in the mindset of all the good things that the Clinton Foundation has done, which to me is all mask, it's all smoke and mirrors, and the same thing with Bill Clinton.
Yeah, they've only donated something like 3% of their money to actual charities. They're not even legally a nonprofit charitable foundation. They never did the paperwork on it.
Yeah, from what I read, with Haiti, less than $1 of every dollar that was supposed to go to Haiti, less than a penny on every dollar actually went to Haiti. But I think what you said is just so important. I think she's just going to run in complete denial of anything that she's done in the past and anything that she's done in the distant past and not so distant past. And the media is going to follow along with that, because they've been denying all this stuff.
I'm not so sure. And, she has sufficiently ticked off the corporate media where, we're seeing the corporate media talk about alternatives to Hillary next year. And this is a case of her arrogance getting the best of her. And I know the Hillary campaign, basically they're down to two excuses. Oh, that's old news. That happened so long ago. Why are you dealing with that? And the other one is, oh, obviously you hate women. That's why you're opposed to Hillary. And they're not going to play. They're not going to get traction for the next year and a half or a year and a quarter.
I think she's just going to keep running on denial, though, and so it's going to basically be, well, prove it. If you're saying this, well, she's not even going to. I don't think she's even going to address it. She's just going to try to, she's just going to try to glaze over everything.
She's trying to handle it. She's trying to handle it like it's a case in court, but we're not in court. Politics is perception. And the people don't need to have proof. If their perception is that she is untrustworthy, that she is selling out to Israel, that she's going to start a war with Iran, which she herself has said, that is going to work against her. Now, maybe she's absolutely convinced that she's got enough money to hire all the Diebold machines she needs to steal the election. But I think her campaign is seriously in trouble. And all other candidates being equal, I'll admit it. I have a personal grudge against the Clintons. And it's payback time. Payback time.
I have actually a family member, an in-law that actually has been working since Bill Clinton's run, and then in the foundation and that sort of thing. But I thought that interview was really just a softball interview, and that's why I was saying that about the media. I just really the questions that they asked her, but of course I'm sure that she was given a list of questions and said, "Oh yes, ask that, don't ask it."
The Hillary campaign is absolutely trying to control the media. Only reporters that the campaign knows will ask the right questions and not ask the wrong questions are being allowed near her, but the rest of the media is looking at that, and they are openly commenting on that in the public corporate media, and people are picking up on that.
Yeah. Take care, Mike. Keep it up.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Story over in Truth and Satire talking about ISIS, the dumbest story ever told. Everybody is realizing that ISIS, just like Al-Qaeda, is a manufactured front group for covert U.S. and Israeli action. They're talking about how the first beheading videos were very obvious fakes and staged, and then in order to try and sell ISIS as the bad guy, these propagandists actually went out and killed people. Burned one guy alive, drowned a bunch more, saying, see, they're really dying. ISIS must be real. No. When you are ready to declare war on the rest of the world, you're already ready to kill whoever it takes to achieve your end. So, anyway. Now, Bernie Sanders, up in Maine, had a campaign stop, drew 7,000 supporters. He is becoming a major problem to the Clinton campaign. Some people have suggested that she tap him as her vice president. I don't think she's going to do that. She doesn't want to have anybody who's more popular than she is in the number 2 slot. But Bernie, make sure you're wearing your Kevlar undies and stay out of small aircraft. Remember what happened to Ron Paul. Remember what happened to Vince Foster. Remember what happened to all those people who were in Clinton's way. We're coming up here on a commercial break. When we come on back, more nonsense from the politically correct crowd about the Confederate flag. They're conditizing us with Bill Cosby, and apparently something he did years ago is being brought up. Oh, we should be shocked about Bill Cosby, blah, 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 blah. All right, so we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, if you're watching the corporate media, we're being conditized like crazy. Fox News is just going on about the ethical considerations of parents wanting to choose the sex of their child. And it's all fluff. And for those of you who don't understand the term that we use, conditizing, it goes back to the spring of 2001, where the U.S. government was already telling other countries around the world that they were going to invade Afghanistan, overthrow the government, put in a puppet ruler to guarantee the flow of oil and opium to the U.S. under favorable economic terms. It was in BBC, it was in Jane's Defense, it was all over the world's media. U.S. is going to invade Afghanistan, except here in the United States of America, where we were fed a constant diet of stories about Gary Condit and Chandra Levy. Were they having an affair? Did he murder her? And it was non-stop coverage. You know, breaking news, Gary Condit crosses the street. Is he staying within the lines on the crosswalk? I don't know. Let's go to the sky cam and see. So that when the 9/11 false flag happened, the American people were caught totally by surprise to magnify the shock value, in order to get the American people to say, yes, let's get those people in Afghanistan for 9/11. And then let's get those people in Iraq for 9/11. And then let's get those people in Iran for 9/11. It's become a one-size-fits-all excuse for war. And so we call that conditizing, deliberately distracting Americans away from what's going on, whether it's the wars, Hillary's campaign meltdown, what's going on in Greece. It's really getting scarce mention, but we're getting stories about ethics of parents wanting to choose the sex of their child. We call it condotizing, and the latest one they are running has to do with comedian Bill Cosby. And they're up there screaming about how horrible it was. Cosby admitted he gave drugs to a woman he wanted to have sex with. Like that isn't something that happens in the dating scene a lot. He didn't force the drugs on her. He gave them to her to take. Party animal. I don't agree with what he did, but it's a common behavior. And they're all in an uproar. How dare Bill Cosby do this in his private life here? And it has already resulted in the cancellation of all the reruns of The Cosby Show. And here's why we know this is condotization. This all actually happened back in 2005. 2005, Cosby got sued by the woman in question, and he admitted under oath he had provided her illegal drugs because he wanted to have sex with her. And again, he didn't force the drugs on her. He didn't dump it in her drink or anything. He just handed her the pills. She took them. She got high and had sex with him and then turned around and sued him. And the case was settled in 2006. And so here we are in 2015, 10 years after. And now it's headline news and we're going to cancel Cosby shows. They don't really have anything more current and pressing to talk about. And they're still going on and on about what they're calling the Confederate flag. And here's the irony. As we mentioned last week, that flag, whether it's on the top of the General Lee in Dukes of Hazzard or on bikinis or whatever, was never officially the flag of the Confederate States of America. It was just a cool design. It was used once as a naval ensign on Confederate ships. But it looks good, and so Hollywood said, oh, okay, that'll be the flag of the Confederacy, and they're waving it around. And they're out there saying, we've got to ban all of this stuff because it means this. And even Abby Martin, who normally has a good take on what's going on, is out there saying, the Confederate flag equals the white supremacist agenda. Well, Abby, I am not going to challenge your right to see it in that light. The problem we have is that the politically correct crowd is out there trying to convince you that you should see symbols the way they define them. However you may feel about the symbol is irrelevant. You're supposed to say, yes, I will allow you to tell me what this symbol represents. And that is nonsense. Because symbols represent different things to different people. For a lot of people, the Confederate flag represents independence and freedom from a central tyrannical government. They want that to go away. They want the idea of independence to go away here. Before Hitler spoiled it for everybody, the swastika was seen as a symbol of good luck all around the world. In Asia, there are statues of Buddha that have that figure on them because they see it as a symbol of good luck. So if Abby Martin wants to see the Confederate flag as a symbol of white supremacism and she doesn't want to have it around her home, that's fine. But Abby Martin, the corporate media, and the politically correct crowd do not have a right to go on out and tell everybody, you should avoid this because it symbolizes whatever. What happens when the politically correct crowd goes out and says the Bible represents a symbol of the Inquisition and the burning of the witches and the oppression and slavery of all people? Are you going to go along with that? Or are you going to say, no, the Bible means something else to me, and you don't have a right to redefine symbols on my behalf? But it's just another way of making noise to keep us all looking over here at these non-issues, because they don't want you looking at what's going on with the economy. Because when the haircuts come to the American banks, they want you to be caught off guard. Just like the people of Cyprus. The people of Cyprus didn't know it was coming until it was already a done deal, and their money was gone. The corporate media they're just rolling in the fluff right now because of all the things that really do impact our lives that they are not allowed to talk about. That's what's going on here. And again, I don't agree with what Bill Cosby did in his private life. I don't. But you know something? Let us not abandon all of the amazing work that he did. as a comedian. The PC crowd has just gone way overboard, where they are presuming the right to tell you what symbols mean to you, how you should think, what you should believe, and that certain topics are off limits for criticism. Certain ideas are sacred, like the fact that the illegal immigrants aren't responsible for crime, or that, humans are warming the earth. It's unpolitically correct or politically incorrect. Let me change my grammar there. To question the dogma. The First Amendment gives us the right to question absolutely everything, including what comes out of government and the corporate media. I'm very disappointed in Abby Martin for hopping on board this bandwagon. Maybe she thinks it's going to improve her ratings or something. Meanwhile, new documents have surfaced regarding the IRS scandal, where the IRS was targeting opponents of President Obama. And the new documents are enlarging the scale of this scandal because it reveals a deliberately crafted plan by the Department of Justice, the Internal Revenue Service, and the FBI to try and find ways to criminally charge Obama's opponents, to run them through a kangaroo court, throw them in prison, to silence his opposition. That's not democracy. That's not a republic. That is a dictatorship. And this goes well beyond Richard Nixon's enemies list and his use of the IRS to target his opponents. Now, as you probably heard, there was this professional hacking software development group called the Hacking Team, and they themselves got hacked over this last week. It turns out their own passwords were ridiculously easy to guess. I guess they thought they were so good at hacking nobody would ever go after them, but they did. And 400 gigabytes of internal documents from this hacking team have been exposed to the public, showing that they sold their intrusive spy tools to some of the most repressive regimes in the world. That is a direct quote from the article over at RINF.com. And I hit that repressive regime in the world because it turns out the FBI, the DEA, and the U.S. Army were all customers of Hacking Team software, buying software that allowed them to take remote control of your computers, record your calls, copy your emails, keystrokes, activating the cameras remotely so they can watch your wives and girlfriends walk around naked. So that's what's going on over there. Apparently the FBI spent almost $750,000 on these spy tools since 2011. To hire this private hacking company to spy on you. All of it a violation of the Fourth Amendment. We'll be right back after the news break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Pardon me. And on the SRN news break, you probably noticed they're still back to bashing on Donald Trump. Oh, you shouldn't play golf on his golf course. You shouldn't go to his casinos, the ones that are still open, and on and on and on. This despite the recent events that confirm Trump was making a valid point. A lot of the illegal immigrants coming into this country are criminals. Technically, they're all criminals the instant they step over that border. That is why they are called illegal immigrants. And I know I'm going to get a lot of hate email from the politically correct crowd saying, oh, you're being racist and you know, with the name of Rivero, you should be more sympathetic to Hispanics. Well, a couple of points of clarification. Rivero's actually a Sephardic name. And the reality is, I don't have a problem with anybody wanting to come to this country, but there is a legal method by which they can do it. And every country has a right to secure its borders in order to protect its own people and its own economy. And it's not just Mexicans and Central Americans. Because of the economic meltdown of Puerto Rico, we're seeing a huge flood of Puerto Ricans coming into the United States of America. Technically, Puerto Rico is sort of kind of part of the U.S., but they're flooding in to cities whose economies cannot support them, whose social services are already strained, out to California, which is already running out of water. There is no wise management of the nation taking place. It's all agenda-driven and politically correct. And, you know, politically correct is Captain E.J. Smith continuing to scream the Titanic is unsinkable as the water starts coming up above his knees. Now, I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump, but he has made a legitimate point, one that both the GOP and the Democrats do not want on the voters' minds next year, and that's why he's being attacked. Now, up in Quebec, they're getting ready to start blocking websites the government doesn't like and doesn't think the Canadian people should see. I presume I'm going to be on the list, and certainly any websites that are discussing the Comer lawsuit are going to be on that list. The Canadian government has gone out and already put out filters for foreign websites talking about Comer. They have ordered their own media to not discuss the issue because the Comer lawsuit raises a very important point for the Canadian people to be thinking about. And that is why when the Charter for the Bank of Canada provides interest-free loans to the government, why the government goes to private bankers to borrow that money at interest. And yes, it was a deal the Canadian government made to join the International Bank of Settlements, but it's a deal they really should not have made because it's imposing financial costs on the Canadian taxpayer to make the bankers richer that are otherwise completely unjustified. And we have the same situation here in the United States of America. They're talking about the debt ceiling, whether it's already been exceeded, whether they should raise it or not, and that's not the question at all. The question is why, when the Constitution authorizes the government to create and issue an interest-free currency to support commerce and the public, a public currency handled as a public utility, why does the government go to a privately owned bank to borrow money at interest and sticking the taxpayer for the interest payments? Well, because it's good for the bankers, and the bankers are very generous campaign donors. And that's really the only reason. Because whether the U.S. is making the money or the Federal Reserve is making the money, it's all made up out of thin air. There's nothing backing it except promises of future slave labor of the American people. That's what backs the Treasury bonds. Now, David Cameron is on the warpath against online encryption in any way, shape, or form. And he's already receiving criticism saying that the degree of encryption suppression and control being proposed by David Cameron would destroy the Internet because the allowed encryption is so weak that it will just open up British businesses to cyber criminals. And Cameron is selling this on the idea that, we've got to make sure that terrorists do not have a safe place in which to communicate. Well, David, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but it's very easy to create codes and encryption that no government agency can break because we did it here at whatreallyhappened.com a year ago, a little over a year ago. We issued 6 encryption challenges. Not one of them got broken. All these encryption controls do is lay ordinary, law-abiding citizens wide open for cybercrime and spying by the government. Real criminals, real terrorists are going to be able to have encryption you will not be able to break. Period. End of discussion. Now, Hillary is running on a feminist agenda for next year, and they're already out there screaming about, there's a rape crisis, there's male abuse of women, women are oppressed, women are suffering, women are, disadvantaged, and if Hillary is elected, she will turn things around and put women up on top. So over at returnofkings.com, they put together an infographic regarding this idea of male privilege that's being bandied around by Hillary's feminist supporters, along with mansplaining and all this other nonsense they're coming up with. And the reality is that there really isn't much male privilege at all in this country, because most of the goals of the original equity feminist movement from the 1980s have been accomplished. And when you look at what men are having to deal with, they overwhelmingly form most of the homeless population because women are not really allowed in combat. Men suffer the crippling injuries and deaths in war. Men suffer largest portion of accidental death on the job. And it's really not as clear-cut as the feminist supporters of Hillary are trying to put out there, where, you know, the women are all victims and the men are all brutish oppressors, and that we have some inherent advantage over them, which we don't. And by the way, if it's so great to be a male, why did Bruce Jenner go the other way? Now, you've probably heard, and this is another case, I think this is conditizing, because you remember Subway Sandwich Company, they make good sandwiches, and Claire and I do eat there from time to time. A couple of years back, they had a spokesman, Jared Fogle, who was the guy who lost something like 200 pounds just eating the low-calorie sandwiches at Subway. And Subway hired him as their spokesman for a bunch of commercials, and he's worth about $15 million. And he put a lot of that into a charitable foundation, a real charitable foundation, which was scandalized recently when the director of that foundation, Russell Taylor, was arrested in connection with a child pornography investigation. Well, obviously Fogle and the foundation distanced them from this guy, but now apparently the FBI raided the home of Jared Fogle himself and confiscated all his computers. And I don't know whether or not he was having child porn on his computers, but they made a big deal about this. It's another piece of fluff they're putting on the corporate media to keep you looking over one place, because they don't want you looking at what's happening to the global economy. They want you to just go on leaving your money in the bank, in your stock portfolio, until it's too late for you to save yourself when the hammer finally comes down. Okay, so, and then corporate media wonders why they're losing audience so much. You can only take so much fluff, really. All right, we got to take a break for commercials here. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, last week we were talking about this incident that happened back on June 30th over in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And former CNN anchor Lynn Russell and her husband, former CNN anchor Chuck DeCaro, had stopped at a motel for the night and were just getting ready to relax, and Lynn walked out to the car to get something, was grabbed by an attacker who was armed, dragged back into their motel room with a demand for their valuables. And Chuck DeCaro basically leapt out of the shower, grabbed his gun, they both carry, and shot the assailant dead on the spot. Good for Chuck. And not too surprisingly, they are now out there saying that the Second Amendment saved their life. And they're absolutely right. Because obviously, once again, the police were not present to prevent the crime from happening. The police are never present to prevent the crime from happening. They certainly weren't present at that church in Charleston, which, by the way, was a gun-free zone. The police show up after it's all over. They pose with the bloody corpses for the media photographers, and they promise justice and retribution, which rarely, if ever, comes. If you have no prior criminal record, and you walk into a convenience store in part of town you normally don't go to and you rob it, there's less than a 1 in 33 chance you will even be talked to by the police about the crime. That's the reality. Now, the opposition to the Second Amendment is coming from a government that fears an armed uprising by we the people, which is nonsense. This revolution is not going to be won with firearms. It is being fought and won with keyboards. But if there's common sense tells you that if we have a right to keep and bear arms, that we have a right to keep and bear arms equal, if not superior, to those in the hands of the criminals who are running rampant all over the country, especially those illegal immigrants who are coming across the border carrying assault rifles given to the Sinaloa drug cartel by the U.S. government's Fast and Furious program at taxpayer expense. And I'm glad these two former CNN anchors are out there talking about it because it hammers home a point. Every year in this country, over 1 million crimes are thwarted, prevented from happening by law-abiding citizens with legally owned firearms. The police can't claim that record. They don't thwart crimes. They're never there when it happens. Rarely there when it happens. Every once in a while, a crook will be an idiot and commit a crime in front of a cop, but 20, 30 times, maybe. The police can't protect you. There are court rulings that say the police are not obligated to intervene to protect you from a violent crime. It was a very famous case in Georgetown. 3 women were sharing a townhouse. Intruders broke in and attacked one of the women downstairs. The 2 remaining upstairs called the police. The police said, "We'll be there." Police never showed up, and all 3 of these women were basically sexually abused for the entire night. And the perpetrators left the next morning. The 3 women sued the police and lost in court when the judge said, there is no law that says the police are obligated to protect you from violent crime. So you have a right to defend yourself. And I'm glad these 2 CNN reporters agree with that. All right, so let's take a little time to talk about human-caused global warming, because already we're seeing all over the media, oh, it's a hot day, it's a hot summer. Yeah, it is summer, and you do get high temperatures. Let's start off with that. But as a matter of fact, July 6th, yesterday, was the second coldest July 6th on record in Fort Collins, Colorado. As we mentioned yesterday, the world's youngest glacier is forming inside Mount St. Helens, an active volcano that's still steaming. And just for those of you who aren't sure what we talk about with a glacier is a mass of ice that lasts year-round and grows every year as more snow grows on it. And Al Gore and his people are out there about, oh, the glaciers are vanishing, the glaciers are vanishing. Some are retreating, others are growing. There are just as many glaciers on Earth today as there were back when Al Gore was in high school. Snow is currently forecast for Scotland's highest peaks. And the carbon Nazis are still out there, screaming about all this stuff. Are shrubs causing global warming? That's the new one. You must pay a shrub tax because your shrubs are warming the earth because they're absorbing sunlight. I have a news flash for all of you. When plants absorb sunlight, they don't give off heat. They use that energy to synthesize sugar. It's called photosynthesis. And it's why areas with green plant cover tend to be cool. Plants are a heat sink. And the people who are writing these propagandistic articles either are clueless about science themselves, or they're just hoping that you are. Probably pandering to the Common Core educated generation. Now, there is a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, Dr. Ivar Giavar, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and he's an Obama supporter. He endorsed him. But he's come out to say that Obama is not just dead wrong, he's absolutely ridiculous on global warming. And he concurs in the opinion, global warming is not a science, it is a new religion. It's a political agenda. And he says, we're handing the United Nations way too much power and authority on the basis of this myth. Not to mention wasting vast amounts of money trying to come up with solutions for a non-existent problem. Now, here in Hawaii, we have become the first state in the nation to ban plastic bags at the supermarket. And I'm actually okay with that. I never liked those plastic bags. They're flimsy, they flop around, you put stuff in the trunk of your car, the bag just collapses, your groceries pop out of the bag and roll around the trunk. And as of the 1st of July, all the stores have paper bags, which are stiff and stand up and hold stuff together. And so I'm actually in favor of this. Not for the reason that the carbon Nazis are saying, oh, it's terrible, it's polluting and it's non-recyclable, which is weird because the plastic bags supposedly are made of a biodegradable plastic to begin with. But I do like the paper bags. And yes, we save and reuse them. But I actually do like them because it keeps things together in the trunk of your car a lot better. Now, we have been talking about this woman in Washington State who died of the measles. There's been yet another new development on that story. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we get on to the woman with the measles here, I want to step back to the global warming situation. As I mentioned yesterday, there is no reason for the American corporate media to be telling us about high temperatures in Europe other than to sell the idea of human-caused global warming. I don't care what temperature it is in Paris. I'm not going to Paris. Never been to Paris, probably never will. I don't care. They're just out there saying, hot in Europe, and the idea is to claim it's broiling hot someplace where you're not going to go and be able to check for yourself. But this is the age of the Internet, and I'm getting a bunch of emails from people all over Europe saying this idea that we're in some kind of an extraordinarily hot summer is ridiculous. Current temperature right now in London is 64 degrees. Current temperature in Berlin, 68 degrees. Forecast is for cooling for the rest of the week. Warsaw, 79 degrees, also forecast cooling for the rest of the week. That's the reality. The record high temperatures are the propaganda because they're desperate to sell you on the need for a carbon tax because they didn't get the money they thought they were going to get from Obamacare. And by the way, those Obamacare premiums are going to go up next year by 20 to 40% for health insurance policies that, by virtue of the sky-high deductibles and the high copays, are pretty much worthless. Because that's how fascism survives. Force people to buy totally useless products at sky-high prices. That's what's going on over there. So now let's get on back to the vaccine controversy. Because, as you know, last week there was a woman in Washington State who died of the measles. And the pharmaceutical public relations firms were all over it saying, see, measles is dangerous. You need to get your vaccine. You got to get the vaccine here. It's important. This woman died of measles. Then it came out she had had the measles vaccine. And the pharmaceutical company public relations firms were trying to backtrack and saying, well, there was obviously something else wrong. There's no reason to think the measles vaccine caused the measles, even though it's been established that, yes, it does. But obviously, in the case of this woman, the vaccine didn't work, did it? Oh, well, there was something else going on. It would have worked if she'd been otherwise healthy. Her immune system was compromised. Well, what is the leading cause of compromised immune systems? Over-vaccination. Well, apparently they've thrown in the towel because now they've come out and officially changed the cause of death. Now they've said, oh, she didn't die of the measles. There really wasn't any sign of measles whatsoever. She'd had the measles vaccine. She couldn't have died of the measles. Now they've changed the cause of death to pneumonia. Now, Bill Gates is out there using his money for a lot of very questionable, I think, activities. He is a proponent of massive global depopulation and the use of vaccines to do it. And apparently his foundation has funded research into a embeddable microchip that will act as birth control. And they're hoping to have it in beta testing in females by the end of the year. The idea that this little chip is operated by remote control from your smartphone or your smartwatch or whatever to when you don't want to have children. Now, the question is, what happens when the government decides that too many women are having babies and they reach out and operate these chips? Because we know anything that's got a chip in it in this country has a government backdoor in it. Remember when the feminists were out there screaming, feminist empowerment means we get to decide when we're having babies. The woman's right to choose. Always in the context of a woman deciding she doesn't want to get pregnant. But there are more and more women who want to have kids. There's a lot of very normal people out here who want to be parents. I was one of them. One of my big ambitions growing up, I wanted to be a father. I wanted to have at least one kid, maybe two. And it didn't work out. So there are people who want to have kids. And what happens when the government says, nah, this population over here, there's too many of them. They're forming a political threat. And they reach out over the internet and they turn off the women's ability to conceive remotely. I think that is very, very ugly technology. Now, we mentioned this last week. It's a big, huge scandal. There's this Iraq war veteran, Chris Dorsey. And he went to a VA hospital because he wanted an appointment for treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. And he was turned away. And they said, we're not accepting any new patients. If you're a veteran and you've got war-related injuries, well, tough. Go on Obamacare. Go to the regular hospital. So he went to a second VA facility in Oakwood, Georgia. And he had his smartphone camera running. And he got on video saying, we're not accepting any new patients, not at this clinic. This from an employee of the Veterans Administration. No additional information. Just, we're not accepting new patients. Gone. Now, whether you agree with the wars or not, and I don't, I think we can all agree that as a nation, we owe a debt to all of those people who put on that uniform and went out and did what they were told to do, even if what they were told to do amounts to war crimes. They didn't know any better. They were doped up. They were drugged on all these antidepressants. And we do owe them. Those who were injured, those who were crippled, we do owe them. And the VA is supposed to represent the embodiment of that debt of honor. But they're running out of money. So is everything else. So they're just turning them away. This is a continuation of a policy that we've seen going back to the beginning of the whole VA scandal. Just ignore the vets and hope they die off. And for those of you being approached by recruiters right now, keep this in mind. Or if your children are being approached by recruiters at school, which they are, you let them know that the promises being made by this government are not enforceable. The government doesn't have to keep them. There have been court decisions saying that any promises made by military recruiters to get your kid to sign that contract are not legally enforceable. Sign this agreement here, we'll make you a nuclear reactor technician. And then the kid spends their entire time in the Army peeling potatoes. Nothing you can do about it. The recruiters are legally allowed to lie to your kid, to say anything it takes to get that kid to sign that enlistment form. And the promises that you will be cared for if you are injured in war, they're not keeping that one either. Another story out of Global Research. After all these years of denial, the U.S. government has finally admitted that Vietnam veterans exposed to Agent Orange were poisoned and did suffer disabling injury. I guess at this point there are so few of the Vietnam veterans left alive that they can afford to pay the settlements. But that's how long it took. Think Vietnam to the present day, and it took that long for the U.S. government to admit that Agent Orange poisoned our own kids in Vietnam. And that's one of the really dangerous things about the war mentality. The idea that no cost is too great to pay, no injury, no harm, no long-term consequences, none of it is relevant compared to the imperative to win at all costs. And unfortunately, our kids bear the costs. The taxpayers bear the costs. The officers get ribbons and medals and honors, and the bankers get rich. The costs of war are borne by you and I, our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm looking back at the story about these two former CNN anchors who defended themselves against an armed criminal and shot the criminal dead, and they're not shy about speaking out. And this former CNN anchor, Lynn, has basically come out talking about gun bans the same way I'm talking about opposition to gay marriage. If you're opposed to gay marriage, don't marry a gay, problem solved. If you are opposed to concealed carry of a firearm, don't carry one. Otherwise, mind your own business. Because the Second Amendment guarantees to all law-abiding citizens the right to keep and bear arms. The United States Supreme Court decision, United States versus Miller, specifically states, we the people have a right to keep and bear the same kind of arms borne by the uniformed military. And as human beings, we have a right to protect ourselves against violent attack, especially in a nation where the police not only will not intervene in a violent attack, but are murdering more innocent Americans than the terrorists and the serial shooters put together. So I'm glad that they're out there. They're being very forthright. I can understand why they're ex-CNN anchors. CNN doesn't want people like that talking about the Second Amendment on the air. It's not politically correct to talk about an armed populace. Armed people won't do what they're told to do. And that's also politically incorrect. You do as you're told to do. You believe as you're told to believe. You will buy what we tell you to buy. And so forth. Liberia has now established a quarantine area around where new Ebola cases are popping up. The UN Special Envoy is saying that in all probability we're going to see more of these Ebola cases emerging. They don't really have it under control. It's very hard in that kind of territory. But again, all of these Ebola outbreaks track back to a vaccination program held at this clinic in Kenema, which was doing contract work testing a vaccine against weaponized Ebola. And I think somebody may have made a mistake. These companies love to test in Africa. Oh, if it becomes an epidemic, who cares? Same reason they grow GMO here in Hawaii. Well, if it gets out of control, it's just Hawaii. Amazing things here. Now, the American Medical Association has issued new directives for all of their members, described as ethical guidelines for physicians in the media to defend the integrity of the profession. This is a very cagey way of saying the AMA is launching a propaganda campaign against holistic doctors or anybody talking about alternative methods of treatment that don't rely on hugely expensive pharmaceutical products. And as we reported last week, all of a sudden some of the leading lights in the holistic medical, alternative medical area are meeting with strange deaths. And so doctors who refuse to accept the dogma of the AMA are going to come under attack. You will believe these pills are the cure. You will believe radiation and chemotherapy is good for you. You will believe vaccines are 100% safe and effective. Or they'll kick you out of their little church. Which brings us to the story of Dr. Fareed Fatah, who is in court right now on a massive fraud case. This guy, it's up in Detroit, he's an oncologist, a professional cancer doctor, and he made millions of dollars telling perfectly healthy people they had cancer and then selling them the treatments. Radiation and chemotherapy, which causes permanent, debilitating harm. And it is a reminder, a stethoscope and a white lab coat does not a good human being make. There was a reason that Hippocrates took a very hard line about not causing any harm. Because even back then, medicine was handled as a religion. You believed your doctor was going to make you well when they slapped those leeches on. And today, our healthcare in this country is totally dominated by the lust for profits. And this doctor is just one example. And yes, enough complaints got him dragged into court. But how many more are out there? It is a major problem with doctors prescribing treatments to perfectly healthy people because it makes money. And that's what they're doing. They're making money. If the American people were 100% healthy, the entire medical industrial complex would collapse. They can't survive unless you are all chronically ill, needing treatment of symptoms forever and ever and ever and ever. That's how they make their money. They need you to be sick. And that may explain why we have so many cases of additives in our food that are known to cause harm. Monosodium glutamate, aspartame, unmetabolized growth hormones in beef and chicken, GMO. And we say there are issues. No, go ahead and eat it anyway. You know, it'll be tasty, and if you get sick, you can go to the doctor and Obamacare will cover you. And so here we have a good example of why we shouldn't just blindly trust the medical industry. This guy, literally, hundreds of patients, perfectly healthy patients. Oh, you've got cancer of the... And sent him off for radiation and chemotherapy because the insurance was paying it, and he made millions of dollars. And he devastated the lives of his patients. Remember, we were talking about this doctor in Great Britain. Murdered 250 of his own patients. Just decided, this person doesn't need to live. You need to understand, doctors, as part of their training, become desensitized to the idea of death. And it makes sense because if you're a doctor and you're really bothered by people dying, you're not going to survive your own career. There's a certain amount of encouraged callousness. And that, unfortunately, does lead to abuse, where life and death are diminished concerns versus making sure that you're generating revenue for the hospital that you work at. And by the way, it's come out many times that hospitals will evaluate their staff based on how much business, how much cash they bring in. Now, there's a growing body of evidence that there are ways of treating cancer that are very effective and very inexpensive. We talked about hydrazine sulfate before. And apparently, many cancers, first of all, 25% of all cancers will spontaneously go away. Left to themselves, 1 out of 4 cancers, your body gets rid of, naturally. The medical establishment's attitude is, we don't know which 25%, so we're going to treat everybody. Because that's 25% more profits. It turns out a lot of cancers cannot survive if your body is alkaline. And there are people who are successfully getting rid of cancer with ordinary baking soda. The American diet is very acidic, and it leads to medical problems like gout and bursitis, which can be treated and cured with alkaline water or baking soda. But they don't want you to know about it because you can go buy baking soda at the Sam's Club, huge bag of it. They want to sell you little tiny pills that cost a lot of money, and that shapes their decision-making. Over in Oklahoma, the courts have... there's the music. I'll leave this one until tomorrow. There's the music. I got to get out of here and back to working on the new version of the website. It is problematic. I'm not sure when we're going to launch. It's soon. Got to solve some problems with this responsive theme issue. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices. Call your local talk radio stations, point them at gcnlive.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.